السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So today is a follow-up to our previous session. The previous session was intended to be more like a public lecture that wasn't meant to be interactive, just to introduce the topic. Today, in my understanding, was supposed to be a workshop, and the challenge we're having is we're in this room where there's a stage and there's a blinding light and I can't see any of you. This was supposed to be a workshop with PowerPoint, and I want to hear from you. So we're going to give this presentation. There are basically 8 lessons, as you can see on the stage. There are 8 different topics that I wanted to cover really quickly to give you a broad understanding or overview of this topic of the readings of the Qur'an. So at each section, towards the end of the section, I'll give you an opportunity to ask your questions. You can, raise your hand and I'll call on you. And also, I think they have a system for texting your questions, so they can let us know throughout the presentation where you can do that. So as I mentioned, Bismillah, the introduction we gave, and I'll just repeat like some points of it really quickly. What are the Quranic readings? Just to understand what they are is, we mentioned that the Quran is very, very unique. It's unlike any other book in the world. So everything about the Quran is unique. Its knowledge, its content, its effect on believers, the way it's memorized. And part of that is the recitation of the Quran, how it's recited. So that also is very unique. It's a book that's recited with this really amazing way where sometimes there's, within the same words of the Quran, can capture different meanings and be able to accommodate different dialects. So the best introduction is this statement here, which is a statement of Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, the great companion, where he said, نَزَلَ الْكِتَابُ الْأَوَّلْ مِنْ بَابٍ وَاحِدٍ عَلَى حَرْفٍ وَاحِدٍ. So he said the previous scriptures were revealed from one door, in one harf, in one way, one language. وَنَزَلَ الْقُرْآنُ مِنْ سَبَعَةِ أَبْوَابٍ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ عَلَى سَبَعَةِ أَحْرُفٍ. So he said, and the Quran, the difference between this revelation and the previous revelation, the Quran came down through 7 different doors from Jannah, 7 different channels, and it was revealed in 7 different ahruf, which are something, it's hard to translate ahruf. Ahruf are like variations. That's the best thing we can say for now. Ahruf are the different ways the Quran was revealed with the same words. It's one Quran. Let no one be in any confusion. It's not multiple different versions. It's one Quran. It's the same words, but there's different ways of reading it. Like in the beginning here, our Qari Hashim, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, look how beautiful he recites. But when you go to any masjid, you listen to different reciters, different imams. All of them have a different style. And it sounds very different, but it's the same words. We can recognize it being the same surah. But these are the differences that we're talking about. They're very minor differences, but they're very beautiful, and they can teach you a lot. So this is the introduction I wanted to share with you. So let's start with an exercise. So this is a workshop. I want everyone here to write down one pressing question that you have concerning the Quranic readings. So is there a text situation set up where we can text these questions, or for now, you can write them down on a piece of paper if you have, or jot them down in your devices. Everyone has a tablet or a phablet here, I know. This is the new age. Every single person, I'm sure, has an iPhone, an iPad, a Note 4, or something like that. So open up Evernote, open up any of those things. Just write down, take a few moments. Just think about, what bothers you, or what's a question that you really have about this topic. And I would like to, this is, if you can use your phones to text the question to these numbers, 815-513-2924. So just one pressing question. This is not a question, we're not going to answer these questions. I just want to receive your questions just to get an idea later on what people think, or have what are some of the issues that people have. So I'll give you like 3 minutes to do that. Okay. Can we get the presentation back? Okay, perfect. Okay, so 8 topics. Let's do topic number 1. With this, I wanted to share some historical context about, we have questions like, what are these Quranic readings? We're not the first ones to have these questions. The companions had questions. So there's a very interesting story about something that happened between Umar ibn al-Khattab and Hisham ibn Hakim. So this is a story that's in all the books of hadith. It's in Bukhari and Muslim. This is the hadith in Arabic. Now I'm not going to translate it. I'll translate it verbally, but on the stage, all we have is the Arabic. So basically, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he says that he was walking by the masjid one day, and he says, سمعت هشام ibn Hakim ibn Hizam يقرأ سورة الفرقان على غير ما أقرأه. So he said, I was passing by the masjid, and I heard this individual by the name of Hisham ibn Hakim, one of the great companions of the Quraysh. He said, I heard him reciting Surah Al-Furqan in a way that I didn't recognize. It's different from the way that I was accustomed to reading. So Umar ibn al-Khattab, the ghairah he has, the power and his effect. So he said, وَكِدْتُ أَنْ أَعْجَلَ عَلَيْهِ. I wanted to grab him. And he was praying. He was reciting in prayer. So he said, I wanted to grab him. I couldn't hold myself back. But what he did, he said, I let him finish. ثُمَّ أَمْهَلْتُهُ حَتَّى انصَرَفَ. I let him finish praying until he was done. And after he was done, he said, ثُمَّ لَبَبْتُهُ بِرِدَائِي. I grabbed him by his collar. So he grabbed him by his shirt and he said, who taught you how to recite like this? And he said, the Prophet ﷺ. He said, no, I don't believe you, because the Prophet taught me from his own mouth how to recite Surah Al-Furqan. So basically, Umar ibn Khattab dragged Hisham all the way to the Prophet, and he was in another location in town, and he never let go. And when he reached the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet asked him what was the matter, and he said, Arsilhu ya Umar. Let him go, Umar. So, the situation was this. Umar explained to the Prophet, look, I heard him reciting Surah Al-Furqan in a different way, and you have taught me to recite in a different way. So the Prophet, he said, okay, Hisham, go ahead and recite. So Hisham recited, and the Prophet, he said, هَكَذَا أُنزِلَتْ. This is how it was revealed. Then the Prophet said to Umar, okay, Umar, you recite Surah Al-Furqan in the way that I taught you. And then Umar recited. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, هَكَذَا أُنزِلَتْ. This is how it was recited, or he was revealed. And then the Prophet said, إِنَّ الْقُرْآنَ أُنزِلَ عَلَى سَبْعَةِ أَحْرُفٍ فَقْرَأُوا مِنْهُ مَا تَيَسَّرَ. That's the key towards the end. The Prophet then reminded Umar and taught all the companions that were in their presence, look, the Quran was revealed in 7 different ways or variations. So recite whichever of them is easy for you. So this is a very interesting story, and this happened between many companions. This is not just one incident between Umar and Hisham. It happened between Ubay ibn Ka'ab and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. It happened with Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. Similar situations where people saw things that they weren't accustomed to, and they all came to the Prophet and he gave them similar lessons. Like, look, there's a way of reciting the Quran that's a little deeper than the way you're accustomed to. So recite whichever of that is easy. What are some of the lessons from this story? Number one, the companions were very careful in preserving the Quran. You can see the ghairah of Umar. Umar was very upset. And all these situations that happened with the companions, it made them, really careful. So they really went up to these, why did they have those emotions? Why did they have those feelings? Because they were so careful to preserve the Quran exactly. So that's one important lesson that emerges from this context. Another thing that emerges is that the differences between these readings were not that great. Why do we say that? Because Umar, even though it was a very different way of reading, he recognized that it was Surah Al-Furqan. He said, I heard Hisham reciting Surah Al-Furqan. He could recognize the verses, he could recognize the words, everything was the same, but it was just in a different way or manner. So the differences weren't great differences. You can't call them versions, you can't call them, almost different surahs. You can still recognize the surah and the words and the meanings, but there were some variations that we're going to get into. Finally, the purpose of these differences, this is very important, where the Prophet, he said, فَقْرَأُوا مِنْهُ مَا تَيَسَّرَ. The purpose of this was just to make it easier for different people to read. Because on some people it's easier to pronounce the ra heavy. In some people it's light. Some people they make imala that we're going to get into. So the purpose of all of these readings was to make it easier for various people to recite the Quran. So that's why across the Muslim world you have different ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. So there's a lot of, the Quran accommodates, only the Quran can do that in a miraculous way, be able to accommodate different dialects and different tongues and different phonetic tendencies. So this is the introduction I want to start out. Also, the last point is, it's not necessary to know all the ways. Now, Umar ibn al-Khattab didn't know all the different ways of reading the Quran. Hisham didn't know. Each one of them was taught one way by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he told them, recite in any way that you choose to. So, it's not necessary for all of us to know this science exactly. It's very complex science. All of us need to recite the Quran, and we need to recite it properly. As long as you have a qualified and good teacher like Qari Hashim or anyone in your communities, then that's how you should be doing it. But at the same time, it's important to be aware of this topic because there is a lot of confusion, and now in the new age where information is spread on the internet and it's so easy to spread information and misinformation, we need to know this topic somewhat. So this is a little background of the historical context. Now we'll jump into the second topic. And I'll take your questions after this. The nature of the difference. What are we talking about by these variations? What is the nature of these differences? Broadly speaking, there are two types of differences. One difference is purely phonological. That means all it has to do with the way of pronunciating, and it has no effect on the meaning. So it's just like saying taha or tehe. It doesn't change the word at all. It's just a different way of pronouncing the words. So it's purely phonological or phonetic. So this is the majority of differences perhaps or fall under this category. And then there's a second type of difference, and there are deeper differences that affect the meaning in some way, and they enhance the meaning. So there are some changes in pronunciation that do affect the meaning. So examples like we mentioned on Friday night, Maliki Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmiddin, right? Malik and Malik are two different words, but all it has to do with a slightly different pronunciation. So Malik in Arabic and also in Urdu and other languages means owner. The owner of a house is Malik, right? So Allah is the owner of the Day of Judgment. If you take the alif out and just leave the fatha, then you say Maliki Yawmiddin, and it was revealed in both ways. Malik means king. In Arabic, Malik means king. So Allah is the owner of the Day of Judgment, and He's the king of the Day of Judgment. So some of these variations do affect the meaning, but they never contradict the meaning. It just enhances the meaning or explains it further. And perhaps the majority of them, they don't affect the meaning in any way. So just a very interesting background, something to know, that not all the changes have to do with changing the words or changing even the meaning of the word. The majority of them have nothing to do with that. It's just a different way of pronouncing the language. So we're done with topic 1 and 2. With that, I'll open the floor now. Just a few quick questions. We're going to get into the details. And inshallah, many of your questions will be answered in the subsequent sections. Any quick questions on the introduction to this topic? You feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you, inshallah. Okay, so the rest of the presentation is examples. So we are going to get into some of what happens there. But just quick questions on the background, the history, and what happened with the companions. I know we're still very early. A lot of your questions will be answered. I'm going to look at some of the information in more detail, inshallah. Okay, let's move on. Let's take now, section number 3 is a closer look at some of these differences. Now, I know everyone's thinking, okay, what are we talking about? What's really going on here? What are examples? So some of the differences, I'll highlight some of them. Obviously, there are so many things here, but I chose some of the things that are very interesting. So one of the things that's very interesting, at least for me, is something here called the Imala phenomenon, okay? The Imala phenomenon. So Imala is a particular way of pronunciating certain vowels. It's basically the inclination of the alif towards the ya sound. So if you can see it visually, this is how it's spelled in Arabic. And basically you have here, you have the alif and you have the ya. Halfway between that, the sound that if you mix 50% alif, 50% ya, would be the sound of imala. What is the sound of alif? Everyone. Ah, right? Ah, that's the sound of alif. What's the sound of ya? Everyone. No, like the vowel sound itself. E, right? The vowel. It's A and it's E. So here you have A, here you have E. What would you think is halfway between that? Okay, air, very good, right? So if you look at the sound, A, it's like a vertical sound. E is on the other side. Halfway between would be A, right? So A, E, A, okay? So that's what we mean by imala. It's basically a way of pronouncing alif that kind of leans it towards the ya. That's what Arabic means, yamilu ila ya. The alif kind of inclined towards the ya. So what do we mean by that? So, so this is, in a spectrum, if you have the fatha here, or the alif, and the ya here, halfway between that would be imala. If you analyze it precisely in like one of those sound studios, you take the A, you take the E, and you mix it, and you just do a spectrum, A, and then you go all the way to the E. So A is halfway between that. So you might be asking, okay, what does that have to do with the Quran? Okay? What does that have to do with anything? There's one place in the Quran for the dominant reading of Hafs where you have to read with imala. Here's a verse. Now, you might say, you know what, I don't want to know the other readings. I'm not concerned with Warsh or Al-Kisa'i or others that do the imala. I just want to read Hafs. Even in Hafs, there's a way of reading this verse. This is a verse in Surah Hud where Allah is talking about Nuh alayhi salam. And He says, وَقَالَ ارْكَبُوا فِيهَا Bismillahi, how do you pronounce this word? Majreha, someone said, right? So here the word, the ra has an alif, right? And it has a fatha. So the original word is mujraha. وَقَالَ ارْكَبُوا فِيهَا بِسْمِ اللَّهِ مُجْرَاهَا وَمُرْسَاهَا. And that's how some of the readers read it. But in Hafs, the way we read it, وَقَالَ ارْكَبُوا فِيهَا بِسْمِ اللَّهِ مَجْرَيْهَا. See what I did? Majraha is alif. If it was ya, it would be majriha. But we do imala here. That's why you have a funny looking symbol sometimes in the mushaf. This doesn't reflect that. If you look in the mushaf, either you have a diamond above the ra or a solid circle or something like that. So that indicates you have to do imala here. So the word is mujraha, right? That's the original word, but the way we read it, majreha, right? The word is majraha or mujraha. There are two ways of doing the meme, but we do majreha. So everyone try that. Majreha. Right? Is the sound of imala. So here it's mandatory to do imala. If you don't do imala here and you're not reciting correctly for Hafs. So imala is what is a feature that the Quran recognized and revealed some of the verses in. Now, in some of the other readings, like the Kufan readings, reading of Al-Kisa'i, the reading of Hamza and Khalaf al-Ashir, they make extensive use of the imala. Okay? So here's an example of a verse in Surah Al-Baqarah and Ali Imran. How would we read this verse in our reading? وَمَا أُوتِيَ مُوسَى وَعِيسَى وَمَا أُوتِيَ النَّبِيُّونَ مِن رَبِّهِمْ. So the word Musa and Isa, the two prophets, the ending of that has a fatha, right? And an alif. Musa, Isa. Now in Al-Kisa'i or in some of these other readings, the way they read it, okay. وَمَا أُوتِيَ مُوسَى وَعِيسَى وَمَا أُوتِيَ النَّبِيُّونَ مِن رَبِّهِمْ. So reading these two words with imala would be Musa wa Isa. And that's how at least 3 of the 10 of Imams read the Quran like that, in certain words. Musa wa Isa versus Musa wa Isa. Here's another example. There are 11 surahs towards the end that end with this alif sound that's on a ya. So we would read this verse, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. Focus on the endings of the verses. They're all alif, right? So now these Kufan readers, they read these with imala. وَالضُّحِى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. So ula becomes ule. This is what imala is. It's basically Okay, this is the last slide. Now I'm going to explain to you why we do that. Imala is basically a more relaxed way of pronouncing the alif, okay? So if you say Musa, everyone say Musa, or Musa. You have to open your mouth. It takes some energy. You have to use your diaphragm. But suppose you're tired at the end of the day. You have a son named Musa, right? And at the end of the day, you come back from work, 10-hour shift, and you're really tired and you don't want to hear it. So you don't want to say Musa, right? You'll say Musa, Muse, right? And actually, there are dialects that do that. So in every language, there's an imala phenomenon. So the reason for imala, it makes it easier to pronounce the alif. And that's the purpose of all of these readings, to make it easier, for suhula, for something to make it easy to read the Quran. So in many languages, we have imala. So imala, this is a very interesting topic. Like, what do you have imala in? For instance, one of the things, so imala has to do with ease of pronouncing the alif, right? So one of the things I do when I teach, like I always ask people how they greet each other, right, in their languages. So it's very interesting when you have casual greetings among people, right? When you meet each other, right? And like with your friends and stuff like that. Your language becomes informal and it's casual and it's relaxed. So how do people meet each other in different cultures? So for instance, in Arabic or for Egyptians, I'm not going to ask how many Egyptians are here. There's always Egyptians here. Egyptians, when they meet each other, what do they say? Amale, right? Amale. That's imala at the end. It's not a formal way of speaking. It's saying, what's up? What's going on? If you're from Alexandria, Zeka Pasha, Zeka. Zayyik becomes Zeka. Zayyik has a fatha, but it becomes imala, Zeka. Ismuke, what is your name, right? Instead of saying Masmuka ya akhi, Ismuke. It's a relaxed way of pronouncing. In Punjabi, now, it might come as a surprise, I'm Punjabi. The Punjabi language has a lot of imala. It's a very sweet language. I know people make fun of it a lot. But it has a lot of imala. So like when you meet each other, kya hal hai, right? That's Urdu. In Punjabi, it's ki hal hai. Ki hal hai. How are you? In Punjabi, you pronounce a lot of words with imala. And my name is Ubaidullah. When I was younger, my grandfather in the village where we came from, when he wanted to call me, he would say, Abadulle nu balao, right? Abadulle, right? Instead of Abdullah, Abdulle. So this is part of Punjabi. It's part of other languages. In Urdu, you have kaise ho, right? Kaise. It's not kaisa ho, kaise ho. That's imala. In Bangla, one of the brothers mentioned that when they meet each other, they say, kya maine so. Kya maine so. So it's like, instead of ka maine so, you say kya maine so. It's kind of like, almost like an imala. Even in English, you have imala. Anyone can think of imala in the English language? So I've never found an example for imala in English until one day I was in a doctor's office in a waiting room waiting for something. And they had the TV on. It was a documentary, one of those mystery shows, murder mystery shows. They were investigating a murder in the South from many, many years ago. So there was a lady being interviewed, and she said something. She was describing the victim. She said she was very sad about her marriage. So that's a southern accent, marriage, very. That's the South. So imala is then I realized that in the further south you go in America, they have imala. So, instead of saying marriage, marriage, very, very. So this is imala even in English dialects. So this is what imala is. It's basically a relaxed way of pronouncing certain things. And in the Arabian Peninsula, imala was a feature of the north. The further north you went, in Hijaz itself, in Makkah, Medina, they didn't do imala. But when you went north to the language of the tribes of Najd, and the further north you went, they used to read and they used to even talk with imala. So that's why the Kufan readers, Kufa is north, they kind of stuck to the imala. Muse or ise. So that's what imala is. Any questions on imala? Yes, brother. Okay, very good question. When do you pronounce it? You don't do it everywhere. So there are rules for that. All these readings, the Quran was revealed to accommodate different dialects. But now we don't have the choice to just mix and match. Now the scholars who documented all of this, They told, okay, in this verse we do imala. Here in this word we do imala. And there's a whole science behind that. If you look up the reading of Al-Kisai, or Tajweed book on the rules of Al-Kisai, it'll tell you we do imala on certain words. Like Musa and Isa, although it's a fatha with an alif, the seat is a ya. If the word is rooted in ya from a root, then generally you do imala. Also, all these words you notice at the ending of the verses, instead of having a full alif, the ya is the seat of the alif. The reason for that is because the root of the word comes from the ya. So when you have the ya, generally, that's when you do the imala. And again, at the end of the day, you have to know, okay, in this verse, it's narrated. It's how you were taught from your teacher, it goes back to the companions. It was the companions, when they taught their students, okay, here we do imala. For instance, this surah right here, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Al-Kisai does imala in all of them. But if you read by the reading of Khalaf, he does imala in all of them except saja. So they'll read وَالضُّحِي وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Why? That's how it's narrated. That's how Imam Khalaf was taught from the companions. So here, not everyone does imala, but here all the imala guys do the imala. So it's basically you have to know where to do it. You can't just do it on your own. There are rules governing all of that. Tajweed is a very complex, it's a very sophisticated science rather than complex. The textbook that I sell is a Tajweed book on the rules of Tajweed according to Hafs. If you were to read Warsh, it would have different rules. It might have a different textbook. If you were to read Al-Kisai, it'll tell you what to do in a different way. So this is imala. Any other questions? So you can see imala, does it change the meaning? Yes or no, quickly. Is it from the first category or the second category? First, right? It has nothing to do with the meaning. It's just a way of pronouncing certain vowel sounds. So this is not a big deal. It's just an easier way of pronouncing certain words. Okay? Now here's another phenomenon. There's something called the pause phenomenon. A sakt. In Arabic, it's a sakt. This is very, very interesting. This is one of my favorite ones. This is, what does a pause do when you speak? Even in English, right? Pause is something when you pause for a moment. A sakt in Arabic doesn't mean a stop. It means a brief momentary pause. So that creates like a dramatic effect. It creates some intensity. It creates something in your message. So even in English, there's a lot of examples of pausing, right? So there's a whole science about public speaking where they talk about using the pauses for dramatic effect to increase the intensity of your message and so on and so forth. In poetry, even in English poetry, there's a specific term for it. It's called a caesura. It goes back to Latin and Greek, but in poetry, when they used to read in ancient English poetry, they would pause in certain places, and that just increases the intensity. So there are examples here, for instance, in Greek poetry, the opening line of the Iliad. The opening line of the Iliad, this is in Greek, and then it was translated into English. They do the same thing, is this. Sing, O goddess, the rage. And these two lines means pause. Of Achilles, the son of Peleus. Although it's the same sentence, but when you read this poetry, you would read it, sing, O goddess, the rage of Achilles, the son of Peleus. You'll give a brief pause, even though it's in the middle of the sentence. But that's how it works with the poetry. This is just an example how you'll have pausing in other languages. In Latin poetry, it's a very prominent feature. The opening line of the Aeneid, of arms and the man I sing, who first from the shores of Troy. So that's how you have to read it. Of arms and the man I sing, who first from the shores of Troy. So this is, it's called a kaisura, and that's the definition of that is a brief pause in a line of poetry or a musical composition. So the pause is very, very important in all languages. All these features that we see in the Qir'aat, they apply in all the languages. They're not just something randomly created. It's something that's part of human languages. So the Quran just perfects it and applies it to the Arabic language. So the pause phenomenon, what are modern examples in today's English? Friday night when Ammar Shukri was doing his presentation, I noticed he used a lot of pauses. Are you ready? Or something like that. When you give a talk, sometimes you pause. And now even in texting and Facebook and so on and so forth, you'll see this. When you see this with a period means a pause. Oh my God, right? Instead of saying, oh my God, That's a pause at every sentence, every word, right? Oh my God. What does that mean? It makes it much more powerful. Instead of just saying, oh my God, this just increases that intensity tenfold. It increases the meaning and the message. So this is in English. Now coming back to the Quran, the reading of Hafs has about four places where there's a pause that's optional. One of them, almost everyone knows, كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. So here, the whole verse is one meaning, right? It's one sentence. But you'll see a scene above this location. And you might have sakt written out. So here, generally in the Riwayat Hafs, we pause here. And it's optional. كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. That's what a pause is. It just increases the intensity of that message. So in Hafs, there's only about 4 places, and it's optional. But there are other readings of the Quran, where there's extensive use of the pause or sakt phenomenon. Particularly the reading of Khalaf, one of my favorite readings. This is a reading of the Quran that every time there's a hamza with a sakin before it, there's a pause. It really makes it very dramatic and intense. So for instance, look at this, one of the surahs, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. We would read it the way we read it, right? إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. Khalaf would read this verse, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها. So this is, every time you have a hamza, and right before the hamza there's a letter that is sakin, there's a pause. And it really increases the drama, increases this doesn't affect the meaning. It's one of those changes, doesn't affect the meaning, but it adds intensity, adds this dimension, and it sounds really beautiful. If you look up any reading of Khalaf from one of the good reciters like Abdul Qadir as-Sufi or others, it's really amazing. Here's a verse. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. That's how we would read it. Now Khalaf would read this verse. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إِلَّا تَكْذِبُونَ. Pause after pause after pause. So this becomes very dramatic if you read it very properly. So this is the phenomenon of pausing, sakt. So any questions so here's another example. I won't read this in the interest of time. So same thing. So there's pausing at specific locations. And there's rules behind that. Why we pause, there's also reasons behind that. It makes the hamza easier. Okay. Okay, so any questions? I'm pausing here. I can't really see you, so you have to raise your hand high if you have questions. Okay, topic number 5. So we have 8 topics, we have 10 minutes, so we'll do it quickly. Some mistakes, if you have a deep knowledge of Quran, you realize many things that are considered mistakes aren't. And I mentioned some of these on Friday. I'll mention really briefly. The word Quran, right? When you turn the television on, the news, and they're always saying the Quran, right? And we say, no, it's not Quran, it's Qur'an, right? But actually, Quran is also correct, because there are readings where there isn't a pause or a hamza there. It's just the fatha is on the ra. إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ. So Quran is not really a bad way of pronouncing. That's one of the ways the Quran was revealed. So you can say Quran or you can say Quran. So most people don't know that because we don't have a knowledge of the readings. In Urdu, we say that a lot. Quran padho, right? Quran padho. And sometimes in our little bit of knowledge and zeal, we say, no, that's wrong. It's Quran padho. That's also correct. But Quran padho, there's nothing wrong with that. Quran, right? The word salah, right? I just said salah, right? So if you ask your son or your child if they prayed yet, how would you say it? Everyone say, using this word. Let me hear you. have you made your salah yet, right? Most people say that. But when you read the Quran in Hafs, it's yuqimuna as-salah. It's salah, right? So, but how many people actually say that? Have you made your salah yet? Maybe some people do. Majority people don't. Have you prayed? Have you made your salah? Because why? Because the sad is a heavy letter. The lam is very difficult to go from heavy to light. Salah is kind of unnatural. That's why in Riwayat Warsh, which is a very smooth reading, it reads it salah with a heavy lam. وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ. And that's how in English it's very hard to say salah. For English speakers, Quran is easier and salah is easier. Like the musalla, right? We have a 24-hour musalla, right? Is it 24-hour musalla? How many people have heard, let's go to the musalla, I'll meet you at the musalla? That's how in Riwayat Hafs it would be وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَّقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. But it's very unnatural for the English tongues to say musalla. So it's easier for us to say musalla. That's why the Quran in Warsh is وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَّقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. It's a heavy lam. So that's an example. Salah is not wrong. So I've seen people being corrected, that's wrong, you have to say salah. But in Riwayat Warsh, salah is also correct. The word Abraham, right? As I mentioned on Friday, there's a reading of the Quran, Hisham and Ibn Dhakwan, that reads, وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهَامَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ. Ibrahim, almost identical to the English pronunciation of Abraham, right? Just the E, Ibrahim. So that's also not incorrect. So there's no need to correct people who say Abraham or Ibrahim. That's one of the ways of reciting the Quran. So that's why this knowledge of the Qir'aat will really make you humble. It'll make you reevaluate your stance. We like to judge people a lot, and we like to give fatwas and pronounce things. But really, it goes back to having deep knowledge when you realize there's a complexity here that's even part of the Quran. Any questions on that? Can we mix? Okay, that's a very deep philosophical question. The scholars debated it a lot. Can we mix? 99.9% of the scholars said no. Because Quran is so sensitive. It's something that if you start mixing, without any basis, you can run into trouble and change, even some verses. So each Imam has a set of rules. Imam Asim has a set of rules. Imam Al-Kisai, where did they get those rules from? From the companions that they learned the Quran from. So each of the 10 readers has rules. This is where we do this. This is where we pause. This is where we do imala. This is where we read this. So you should go by those rules. So you pick one of the 10 imams and you correspond with that. But you can't just start mixing, read one verse like this, one verse like that. Then that really is not really preserving the Quran. So you have to go in the manner that you were taught, inshallah. Very good question, though. Any other questions? Yes, in the back. I think I see a... Yes. Okay. Very good question. They're related. That's a question that's very important. People ask a lot. Is any of these readings preferred? And did the Prophet have one specific way of reading? Now, going back to that introduction that I mentioned, نُزِّلَ الْقُرْآنُ عَلَى سَبْعَةِ أَحْرُفٍ. It was the Prophet ﷺ who taught Hisham differently, and he taught Umar differently. And he said the Quran was revealed in all these different ways. So all these ways go back to the Prophet ﷺ. It's not allowed for us to invent any way, even based on our language. So everything that we're talking about here went back to the revelation of the Quran. That's why in the last reading of the Quran, when the Prophet would review the Quran every Ramadan with Jibreel. And in the last year of his life, he reviewed the Quran twice. So it was a greater effort. And he reviewed all of these ways. And even Zayd ibn Thabit was present in that reading. So all these readings go back to the Prophet. So they're all authentically transmitted. They're all part of the Quran. They're all part of revelation. So that kind of answers that question, that there's no one that is preferred over the others. It's just, why do we read by hafs? There's a slide for that, why we emphasize hafs so much. But all of them are equal. It's like, the sunnah, if you have a sunnah on some matter where the Prophet prayed 3 witr or 1 witr, you can't say 1 is better or 3 is better. The Prophet did both. They're all sunnah. So you can pick what corresponds to your circumstance. Wallahu a'lam. Is there any, yes? Well, we mentioned in the first slide that the majority of differences in the Qira'at don't affect the meaning. But there are a few changes that enhance the meaning. So not like everything we mentioned so far didn't affect the meaning. Then I'll have a slide where sometimes it does enhance the meaning in some way. So that's the minority of the Qira'at. But it does it in a way, in a miraculous way, where it enhances and explains the meaning rather than contradicting it. That's something very important to know. Okay? Okay, let me move on. I see a 3-minute thing. Alhamdulillah. 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Okay. Okay, now here are readings that enhance tafsir. That goes back to your question. I'll do them quickly. So here in the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. There's another way of reading this verse from another Imam where you read كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتابه ورسله. So now here, what happened here? You have kutubihi, all you do is put an extra alif. The word is the same, doesn't change the writing of it. You just put an extra alif after it, it becomes wa kitabihi. This is a difference in meaning. So what's the meaning of the first part? This is where Allah says the prophet and the believers, they believe in everything that was revealed on the believers. They believe in Allah and His angels and His books and His messengers, and they don't distinguish between any of them. So here, this reading would mean they believe in Allah and His angels and in His book and in the messengers. So in His book, what is the book? The Quran. So here it refers to the Quran, which is part of all the scriptures. But in this reading, it refers to all the scriptures. So it just enhances the meaning. Both of them are absolutely correct. They're certainly not contradictory. This reading emphasizes the Quran. This reading emphasizes all of the scriptures. So these are examples of differences. There's another way of reading, لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله لا يفرق بين أحد من رسله. So the first thing is لا نفرق is a statement of the believer. They say, we believe in Allah and His messengers and angels, and we don't distinguish between any of the prophets or messengers. Here, لا يفرق بين, this is the third person. They, yani the believers, don't distinguish between any of the prophets. Both meanings are sound. It just changes the emphasis slightly and enhances tafsir. Quickly, here, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ. About the hypocrites, Allah says, they will have a painful punishment because of their lies, because they used to lie. And the other reading is, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يُكَذِّبُونَ. Same word, except you put a shadda over the dhal. يَكْذِبُونَ يُكَذِّبُونَ. What's the difference? This is because they used to lie. This because they used to accuse the messengers of lying. That's the difference. They used to ascribe lies to the messengers and the believers. So this is the difference in the meaning. It enhances the meaning. And absolutely the hypocrites did both. They lied because they say, قَالُوا آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah says, they say, we believe in Allah, pretending to be Muslims, but they did not. So they lied. And also they called the believers and the liars as well. So both of them enhance your tafsir and your understanding of the Quran. Last example of readings that enhance the tafsir. This is the story of Maryam. So the mother of Maryam, when she bore birth to Maryam alayhi salam, فَلَمَّا وَضَعَتْهَا قَالَتْ رَبِّ إِنِّي وَضَعْتُهَا أُنْثَى وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا وَضَعَتْ وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى. So when she bore birth to Maryam, she said, the mother of Maryam, رَبِّ إِنِّي وَضَعْتُهَا أُنْثَى. O Allah, O my Lord, I bore birth to a female. And Allah, وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا وَضَعَتْ. And Allah knows best what she bore birth to. وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى. And the female is not like the male. So here, in this reading, this is the way we read. It's basically the mother of Maryam speaking, and then Allah inserts a parenthetical remark. She says, I have given birth to a female, and Allah inserts, Allah already knows what you gave birth to. And the female is not like the male. This is Maryam speaking, the mother of Maryam speaking continues. Another way of reading it, and it's also valid, وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا وَضَعْتُ. So here it would be, the whole thing is a statement of the mother of Maryam. فَلَمَّا وَضَعَتْهَا قَالَتْ. She said, Oh my Lord, I gave birth to a female. وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا وَضَعْتُ. And Allah knows best what I bore birth to. That's the difference in meaning. And the female and the male is not like the female. So this is, enhances the meaning. It's the same. There's no contradiction here at all. It's just enhancing your understanding of the Quran. Okay? So that's point number 6, and I'm at negative 50 seconds. So I think we'll end there. We won't do 7 or 8, but we'll take a few quick questions because I know this is a topic that really requires interaction. Any questions? Yes. Yes. Yes, there is. Absolutely. Okay. So the question is, sure. The question is, this is a significant difference in the meaning in some of these examples. Um, and isn't one of them a mistake? So here's the issue. Absolutely, there's a difference in the meaning, and it's a significant difference. But if you look at, step back and look at both meanings, um, they're not contradictory differences. It's not like one verse saying something the opposite of the other. Now the issue is which one's a mistake. If you look at the history of this, all of this was revealed like that. It was revealed like that. So Jibreel came down with kitabihi, and Jibreel came down with kutubihi. And it was on the Prophet's heart that both of these were imprinted, and the Prophet reviewed this with Jibreel. So what we're talking about here are not tafsir different. We're talking about how it was revealed. So all the examples I'm giving and the examples of these authentic qira'at, the Quran was revealed like that. It came down both ways. And I know a lot of people have trouble with that, but the point I made Friday night, the last point I made was, why do we want everyone to be exactly the same? Using the same, the Quran was revealed with multiple meanings. Why do we have a trouble understanding that? The Quran is so complex, it's so sophisticated, it's the speech of Allah. Why do we have to restrict it to one way of reading? So even the Quran itself was revealed in this multiplicity of ways of reading. Not in every verse, but in some of the verses at least. But it was from Allah in a way to enhance the meaning. So that's something that should make us more tolerant, make us less, intolerant of others. Because sometimes, in generally the way we act, we want everyone to, if we have a view on something, we have to prove that we're right and everyone else is wrong. We have to write rebuttals. And we want everyone to follow our view and things like that. But kitabihi is correct, kutubihi is correct. Because it was revealed like that to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Each meaning is correct. Each meaning emphasizes a different aspect of the reality. Now, what's the meaning of that verse? That's why the scholars of tafsir need to step back and then they look at all of these things and come up with a comprehensive understanding of the verse. Sometimes not enough just to look at one side. That's why some of the mufassirin, like Qurtubi was a genius. He was a mufassir from Andalus. And his tafsir is marvelous. His tafsir is one of the few tafsir that looks at these different. So every verse he'll talk about, okay, this verse was also revealed in this different way, which adds this dimension of the meaning. So it's different dimensions of the meaning, but these are all the words of Allah. Just think of them as the words of Allah, the kalam of Allah. You cannot restrict the meanings or the words of Allah. Only Allah can do this. It's not that way. In Sudan, if you go to Sudan, you'll find the reading of Duri. So many of the mushafs might be written with Duri. But generally, it's hard to find them because the next slide, I'll just mention the topic. I didn't have time to do this, but the issue is, why are all the readings in Hafs, right? Why are all the mushafs in Hafs? That has to do with globalization. It's not a conspiracy. Globalization affects everything, right? So part of that was when the Muslim world became united, printing presses came. They had to pick one reading, so they picked Riwayat Hafs. And the first printing presses that issued the printings of the Quran were printed with Hafs. And what did everyone else do? They just copied off them. And then all the other printing presses, they just copied those readings. And today, everyone in every house, every masjid, we have the reading of Hafs. But it's just a historical coincidence. But the other ones are available. There are people that know this science. There are very few scholars in the world that have mastered these. It's not, but it is a revival of that. And there are parts of the Muslim world that always had these readings. So they never really died out. But part of the globalization phenomenon, everyone has to, all the PDFs are in Hafs, majority of them. And you might find some Warsh out there, but it's hard to find Abu Ja'far or some of the other readings. But they do exist in the libraries, in the books. In printing presses, you have to print what sells. If you start printing Abu Ja'far, who's going to buy it? It's all economics. That's what globalization is. So, they have to print what sells. So in the majority of the Muslim world, they read Hafs. So why would they print these other readings? They don't want to confuse people, and it's not going to sell. They're going to lose money. That's basically the bottom line. It's nothing negative or evil. That's just the way the world works. We have to get used to it. Any other questions? Yes. Okay, so this is a good question. We mentioned on Friday the debate between Jimmy Swaggart and Ahmad Didat, where he referenced, and the churches, they still reference the burning of the Mus'hafs by Uthman. So, and the question was, weren't they authentic? So what Uthman actually did is a misunderstanding. He didn't just, it's not like there were different versions of the Quran out there and he burned all of them and kept one. That's not really what happened. What it was is, if you look at any of your notebooks right now, people who attend classes, open up your notebooks. Everyone has their own footnotes, right? They might have like the verses in the middle, on the side, they'll write, this means that, this means. So the companions, they had written copies of the Quran. They had written copies of verses, maybe not the whole Quran, parts of the Quran. And they would put things in there, like, some of them, they added dua qunut, right? In witr, you say the qunut prayer. So some of the companions, they wrote that because the Prophet used to teach the qunut. He used to teach istikhara. He used to teach some of these du'as in the way he taught the surahs of the Quran. So many of these companions, what they did, they would write that. It's their personal notes. So and they would write the meanings of the verses. They will say, imagine you're sitting in the audience with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's talking about a verse. And he says, any verse, inna lil muttaqina mafaza. And he says, mafaza here means this. And you just heard something amazing from the Prophet. What would you do? You would want to write it down. So you put right next to that, you don't have a lot of time, you'll put a word next to that, this means that. So many of these copies represented the personal notes of the companions with the Quran and additional material. So what Orientalists do, they look at that, they say, the Quran was different, there were different versions. No, they were never meant to be Quran. If you write a verse that I just quoted in your notes, right, and someone comes later, you die, and someone digs up your notes, and they say, look, this guy's Quran is different. That's insane, because that's not meant to be Quran. That's his personal notes. The majority of these manuscripts that were discovered, they represent the personal compilations of the companions, which include tafsir, includes du'as, includes things that come to their mind. They were never meant to be mushafs that were published. What Uthman did, there was a danger that maybe now the companions were dying off. These things were in circulation. Maybe someone would take them and misinterpret them and think that that's part of the Quran. So he burned many of these manuscripts out there that represented these things. And then he standardized one script, and he wanted everyone to write in the same way. So that's basically what he did. It wasn't like different versions of the Quran. Wallahu a'lam. I think we're 9 minutes over. Do we have when do we need to stop? Okay, let's keep taking questions till one of the organizers comes up here and grabs me by the collar. Okay, any other questions? Is time? Okay. I'm available here for a little bit longer. I'm here half an hour more. I'll be at the booth outside. If you have questions, personal questions, you can ask me directly, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم.